To this now, Africa 360 Advisory founder and CEO Chris Maruleng says not much has changed since Emmerson Mnangagwa took over as president in Zimbabwe. The United States imposed sanctions against him yesterday, including his wife and other senior government officials for corruption and human rights abuses. They replace a sanctions program which was introduced 2 decades ago.
What we witness on the ground in Zimbabwe is a faltering opposition, an opposition that has ultimately all but collapsed in that country. And this is mainly due to the operating environment and some strategic mistakes that have been made by opposition leaders in that country. Secondary to that has been the lack of effective governance that has been really the trade in stock of the governing party in that country, which has been Zanu-PF. There has only been one party in charge in that country. And I think our analysis has also been slightly off in the sense that we have not condemned the fact that in 2017 there was a military coup that saw President Robert Mugabe being kicked out unconstitutionally from office. A lot of people thought any change would be as good as a holiday. But as we have discovered, the corruption, the human rights abuses have continued even under this new regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa. There has not been an improvement in the economic situation. Some argue, in actual fact, that the economy has worsened.
Well, let's take this conversation further now, and we're joined by Zanu-PF spokesperson, that's the governing party in Zimbabwe, Farai. Marapira is the spokesperson there. Mr. Marapira, good evening to you, and thank you for your time. Nick Mangwana, that's the spokesperson for the Zimbabwe government, quoted as saying that this is a great vindication of President Mnangagwa's foreign policy direction, and specifically he was referring to the lifting of the old sanctions program. Is that how the governing party sees it?
Well, it is a vindication in the sense that the open door policy of President Mnangagwa has forced the Americans to try and revisit their sanctions and try to sanitize their sanctions. But sanctions are vindictive and sanctions are aggressive. So as long as we remain with any sanctions against anyone in Zimbabwe, especially our leader and senior members of government, then we still haven't made much progress. But this attempt by the Americans to try and sanitize their sanctions regime is a sign of the successes in our foreign policy, where we've said we're a friend to all and an enemy to none.
But the statement from America is very clear that issues of corruption, human rights abuses, including stifling opposition parties in Zimbabwe, remains a problem. And perhaps this is part of the reason why the president, including a number of senior government officials, remain under sanctions. Has anything improved in that regard?
To be honest, these are just allegations without substance, and the Americans know that this is just rhetoric. America will never put sanctions on the basis that it is stating there, because it has so many countries it is trading well with who are doing terrible things in this world. But the mere fact of things is that this is just a matter of American foreign policy. We can never run away from the fact that these sanctions are brought about because of our land reform, because of the need by Zimbabwe to be self-reliant and self-guiding and autonomous. The neo-colonial agenda of the West cannot accept an African country which is self-determining. So all this hullabaloo about human rights abuses, corruption and all these things, we and the Americans know, and every analytical Zimbabwean or person in the world knows that this is not the case. It is a simple case of challenging the Americans to show a record of human rights abuses within the last 12 months. A case of the United States government showing us the corruption that they allege which has occurred within the last 12 months, which is the basis for these sanctions. I'm sure they will come up dry and they will not come up with anything tangible to speak of. because we have a vibrant democracy in process and we've got a vibrant democracy at play.
When you say that these are just allegations, the jailing of opposition party leaders, that is something that the world has seen. The jailing of journalists, that is something that the world has seen. I'm merely scratching the surface here, sir. So when you say these are mere allegations, I put it to you, you are the one who is sanitizing the situation in Zimbabwe, are you not?
Not at all, because here in Zimbabwe we do not arrest politicians, we do not arrest journalists, we arrest people who have committed crimes, regardless of their political office or station. You cannot claim that a person who incited violence was jailed unfairly when last weekend, within the last week at the burial of an opposition member, he was embroiled in a case of violence at the gravesite. So this is the nature of things. We cannot have people committing crimes on the basis that they shall run to the media and state so many different things. We do not arrest a person based on their profession. We arrest people who have committed crimes, whether they be politicians, journalists, bankers, taxi drivers. Anyone who commits a crime is liable equally before the courts of law. And we shall not hesitate to have the police do their job simply because it might not be fashionable with some media houses and some certain embassies which have an agenda to pursue.
And journalists, the jailing of journalists, what justification could there be?
We do not arrest journalists. We arrest people that have committed crimes. If a journalist commits a crime against the laws of Zimbabwe, then they are arrested, just like anybody else. There is no one who's given any special treatment before the law, and there's no one who's given any extrajudicial treatment. Our courts are very open and they're very free. I will simply challenge you to have these allegations substantiated by showing how at law these arrests are unlawful and how at law any of the process during which this person was being tried is unlawful. The laws of our country are very clear.
So let me ask you a specific...
it can clearly be proven.
So let me give you a specific individual's name. Hopewell Chinono was thrown in jail. One of the most difficult jails, we understand, in Zimbabwe. And he sat there for months on end. What crime did he commit, to your understanding?
To my understanding, Hopewell Chinono will have committed a crime. He was in remand. And serving time in remand is not the same as serving time in prison. But this dovetails back to the same situation. It is not my burden to prove that Hopewell was arrested fairly. It is his burden to prove that he was arrested unfairly. And if you're to go on his timeline or to go anywhere where he has argued his issues, he has no facts at law where he says why he was unfairly arrested. We need to understand that we cannot approach the law with morality or opinion, because the law is the law and the law states what it is. If a person has committed a crime at law, he will be arrested. And people cannot try and postulate that if they commit crimes and they're arrested, then they can seek a political solution to a criminal offense. We will not have that. We fought for independence so that we could have a sustainable rule of law, and that is what we abide by.
Let's conclude the conversation, and let me ask you about whether you think Zanu-PF is the party of the future Zimbabwe. Is that something that you really honestly are convinced that this is the party that is going to turn things around in Zimbabwe for the better?
I do not want to say that Zanu-PF would turn things around when Zanu-PF is actually turning things around. And for evidence of this, you do not need to look at what I say or look at any pro-government papers. You can look at the reports of the World Bank, the reports of the IMF, international institutions which are run by the same Western countries which spread the message that Zimbabwe is a failing state. We have one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. Despite these sanctions, despite all these strictures that are being put against us, So my question is, imagine a Zimbabwe which would have no sanctions, where our vision under President Mnangagwa was allowed to run without any hindrance. Where would we be today? One doesn't need to even travel 10 kilometers out of the capital city to see the wonderful, marvelous infrastructural development that is taking place and the way the economy is growing in leaps and bounds. This is the reality of Zimbabwe, and any person who visits Zimbabwe will tell you this. So the old story that Zimbabwe is a dying state, Zimbabwe is a suffering state, that story cannot carry anymore today, because the reality is very tangible, the reality is very different. And Zanu-PF has been proven to be the part of the future by the vote that the people gave it in on the 23rd of August last year. We are the party with the faith of the people, we are the party with the belief of the people, and we are the party with the vision of the people. It is Zanu-PF which will take Zimbabwe forward. It is Zanu-PF which is taking Zimbabwe forward. And under the leadership of President Mnangagwa, there is no stone that will be left unturned as we develop and progress our nation forward.
And yet it is said that almost 3 million Zimbabweans are food insecure. If really things are turning around in Zimbabwe, why would that be the situation?
We are facing an impending drought. And I will ask you a simple question. Can any of those people saying that show you any picture of people that are suffering or in the last stages of hunger? We are a very astute government. We've been farming and reaping more than our annual needs for the past 2 years. So we have our stocks. Whatever we need to replenish, we will buy. We have no challenges at all. We've got a very sound social security system which will be taking care of our people. That is what the Zanu-PF government is about. It is a people-based party, and it is a people-based government, and we say to the aspirations of the people. Any normal Zimbabwean knows that, yes, we're facing this impending drought and this impending challenge with food, but our social service system is already in place, and we are ready to roll it out and start attending to areas that are under challenge. As a matter of fact, in some of the areas which are always drought-prone, whether we have a good rain season or not, we've already started rolling out food. So there's a difference between propaganda and then there's a difference between propaganda and reality. What we have to tell you is the reality, and what others have to say is the propaganda. It's simple. It's a matter of proving. It's a matter of putting facts in front of what you say. That is the difference between us and our detractors. They have no evidence, just rhetoric, words with no substance, and they always end up hollow.
Farai, Marapira, let's leave the conversation there. Although, yeah, I have lots to say, but time is against us.
So do I.
Thank you very much for your time.